Was 2019 really that good of a year for the Toronto real estate market? Stay tuned to this week's episode of Prime Property. Promise you, it'll be worth it. Good day, Toronto. Welcome to another episode of Prime Property. So glad you could join us here. It's a new year, and now we can start talking about last year because Treb just released the numbers for December 2019, and we can fully kind of take a step back and evaluate how the year was as a whole. Now, before we break down the numbers, it would be really helpful if you guys like this kind of content. Make sure you give the video a thumbs up and to subscribe to the Prime Prep Studio channel. Just the subscribe button down there. It will greatly help promote kind of the channel and our messaging out there for helping people create some wealth of real estate. Now, before we reevaluate 2019 as a whole, let's kind of take a step back and look at some of the numbers that December came in for 2019. Usually I don't look at or put too much emphasis on December 2019 because it's kind of such a slow month and it's kind of always one off that it's not really indicative of anything, and I usually just glance over it. However, with 2019 December, that's kind of the same thing, but two things kind of came up to me I do just want to draw everyone's attention to. The first one being that there was about 3,500 new listings. However, there is 4,400 transactions. Now, if you've been following along my content, you'll kind of have an idea of you knowing what that means. For those who don't, it just means that we have more transactions than we have sales, which means we have more transactions than we have inventory. And this has only happened twice in the last decade or so, once being last month. That's why this was kind of a little bit strange. However, because it is December, I'm going to say take it with a grain of salt. But when you put those two numbers together, it puts our month of inventory at about 0.80%, which is crazy low, meaning that we're just going to be out of inventory next month if we have no inventory, which is kind of a thing in January. However, again, because this is December, I wouldn't say this is a huge warning sign saying that prices are about to explode, because last time, the only other time in the decade that we saw that, prices basically exploded and like 15 or 20% increase month over month. So do not worry because it is December, but can this continue? There's a very minor chance if January inventory stays very low, which January does tend to. So we're gonna have to see how strong the market is in January and how much inventory, which is the most important thing, is available in January. Another stat that everyone tends to look at is the average price. Generally, I wouldn't even look at average price. However, this one was a little bit strange as well, and that's why I said take it with a grain of salt. Again, normally when you see from November to December, the transition of the month, you usually see a price drop of about 4 to 5%. However, in the last month, we went from November 2019 to December 2019, we saw a price drop of 0.69%. Which is kind of strange because prices stayed about where they were from November to December. Now, I wasn't here, but from talking to some of the people in the field, there was actually a lot of multiple offers happening in December. This could be a combination of the fact that there was no inventory and there was a lot of sales, or people are still quite active in the real estate market. Now, I wasn't there speaking to people, but this is all just kind of hearsay and anecdotal evidence, but the numbers kind of do point that way. So let's kind of keep an eye on how January pans out before saying that this is an actual trend that we're seeing. Because again, December is a really weird, wonky month. Now, let's take a step back and look at 2019 as a complete whole. The stats say we're up about 12.6% in transactions to 87,000. Now, that doesn't really mean too much if you've been following the market for a long time, because in 2018 we were at a decade low of 78,000. So that increase is nice, but it's still at an all-time low, 10-year decade low, okay? The approximate average we should be looking at is about 90,000 transactions, and now it's kind of back in the early 2010s when we start creeping up to increase it to about 90-something thousand. So I wouldn't really say it was an amazing year per se. It was more of a great bounce back year for 2019, as you can tell from the last 2 years of declining transaction and sales. 2018 was actually the first year where we're going to start to see an increase in price and an increase in transactions from that kind of steep drop off in 2017. 2019 was also the first year where we actually had an increase in price in the last 2 years because they were declining, including some of the transactions. But you kind of have to balance that out because the 2019 condo market was quite strong, so was 2018 because condo prices kept going up. It was the detached market that was coming down a little bit. So take it with a grain of salt. Now, if you do want to continue learning how to profit from the condo market, make sure you subscribe to the strategies that we use for outlining how to find the perfect pre-construction. I'll put a link in the description below for you guys. Now, again, back to the average prices, why we don't want to use that metric to analyze how 2019 was. It's because it's still very neighborhood specific. So as an example, I'll give you, in the York region, this is like Markham, Richmond Hill, and Vaughan, prices are still ultimately down about 15 to 20%, even if there are pockets of condo increases, because that's where it got hit the hardest. But if you look in like central Toronto or kind of like the Rosedale area, prices actually went up quite a bit from 2017. So that's why you really need to find someone or an agent, if you're going to buy and sell, that who knows what they're doing, because it's very neighborhood specific now. You can't just look at that one metric and say, oh, the Toronto market's doing well now because, you know, transactions are up, prices are up. It's not. Certain pockets are still not doing very great. Now, another thing that we always look at is kind of how the months were kind of comparing from 2018 to 2019. I'll put a chart up here. You can see that everything was kind of an increase compared to 2018 with the exception of January and February. And that was kind of like what I would say was taking the time for the market to ramp back up. When it comes to about next year, we're probably going to see somewhere along the same type of trend. January will probably be a little bit slower from inventory, and that's just my guess, and we'll probably start ramping up a little bit afterwards. So my bold prediction for 2020 is kind of be somewhere similar to 2019. I would expect a transaction increase from 8 to 10%, putting us back in the 10-year average of about 95,000 transactions. Pricing wise, I say we're going to probably increase about 5 to 6%, putting us around 850,000 to end the year. However, keep in mind though, don't use the 5 or 6% against the property you're selling or the property in the neighborhood you're trying to buy, because that 5 or 6% is going to be very neighborhood specific. York may experience something totally different from downtown Toronto. Actually, very likely it's going to experience something totally different from Toronto. So make sure you guys find a good realtor that knows what they're doing. If you guys like content like this, I do have a weekly newsletter with approved investment opportunities and kind of keeping tabs on how the market is, because definitely you're going to want to keep your eyes out on 2020, because a lot of things are going to be coming down the pipeline that's going to change how the way we buy and sell and perceive transaction. Until next time, guys, happy real estating. Now that you're done watching this one, how about this one? Oh, you know what? This one's good too. Ooh, this one's really good. You know what? Just watch them both.